What up, everybody? DE Bio. This is Wednesday, April 29th. That's what it is. I'm filming it on Tuesday the 28th. Guess where I'm at, folks? That's right. That's right. Here we are in lovely room 2205 in 360 degrees. I had to come in and pick up a couple of deliveries to inventory for the classroom, so I figured I'd do my quick discussion lecture with you guys from right here at my podium. All right, everybody. I know you've heard me play this one. 2 points if you can name the band. Ready, go.
Can I kick you? Can I kick you?
All right, you guys got a quiz coming up on Friday, so we're going to talk a little bit about that. Let's do this. So for today, you don't have an assignment. You are absolutely watching this lecture and making sure you're clear on anything and everything that came from this phylogenetic trees assignment that we did for that online lab last week. But there's no other assignment. You do need to submit your April bell ringers, but everything's there in your folder. What I wanted to do is just take 10 minutes maybe to go through this activity fairly quickly. I really did like the layout of this. I wish I could have gotten some feedback from you guys. You may not love it as much as me, but I thought it does a great job of really laying out for you how we derive relationships evolutionarily and classification-wise between species and between different types of life. So I'm just going to zip through these answers and check them with yours, make sure that things make sense to you. Again, I suggest you take some supplementary notes so that anything that I talk about in detail here, you may not just see it on your assignment, but if you take a few notes, write a few things down, then you're covering your bases in terms of not just the work that we've done, but what I'm pointing out is of most important nature for each of these assignments. So as we look down, according to the little intro video that you watched, the 2 key ingredients to natural selection, I wish if we would have done this in class, I probably would have started with a bell ringer of this just to see how well we could have done as a class without any research or watching a video. Your answer is that variation piece and then reproduction, being able to pass on those advantageous genes to the next generation. Number 2, the fittest means in an evolutionary sense. That means the most reproductively successful, those that can pass on their genes. Actually, I'm going to turn. You don't need to see the clock. That's terribly boring. We'll just go like, oh, I had it. I was there. I was trying to situate it better. There we go. Number 3, evolution is neither entirely fixed nor entirely random. So it doesn't automatically head in a direction no matter what. It depends on the environment, depends on what's going on. So there's nothing random or fixed about it. It's just in response to the environmental changes that go on. If we look at number 4, what is happening in this image? Well, we're seeing the brown or yellowish insect getting snapped up by the bluebird, and the green insect here is camouflaged. That illustrates natural selection. I'm sure you guys did a great job explaining this because it's nothing too terribly tragic to understand or know. It's a concept that I think you guys had pinned down real well before we even left each other back in March. The green guy survives and is able to pass on its more fit genes to its offspring. According to the video, the goal for the tree of life is to explain how all species are related to each other. And then you guys got into making your phylogenetic trees, and you watched a short intro video. The red circled node right here, a node is just a branch. Where you see a branch point where one line branches into 2, that point right there is a node. So as we look here, it's marked very well in this picture. That red dot is a node. And so that represents here both the common ancestor of, oh my goodness, that's actually not correct. That should say, it should be B then, just a speciation event. I didn't really read the letters very well when I was doing my answers. This red circled node is not the common ancestor of species A and B like I'm marking here in red and I'm catching my mistake. If it would have said the common ancestor of species B and C in a speciation event, then our answer would absolutely be C, both A and B. But in this case, our actual correct answer should just be B. When we see that branch happen, and we see that one line branch into species B and C, that's a speciation event, where we talked in chapter 24 about the different modes of speciation, whether it was allopatric or sympatric. Time runs on this tree from the root at the bottom up to the branch tips. And it's not always going to be that way. You could absolutely see a phylogenetic tree just like this, where it's tilted 90 degrees. And so you just need to see where the branches open up at the end. That's the end of time, or more present day time. And the root, or the beginning, is here where we see that initial root, the beginning of the branching of the different species. Which lived more recently in time, the common ancestor of species A and B, or the common ancestor of species B and C? More recently in time, and this is all just relative time. There's nothing absolute. We can't tell from this graphic how long ago these events occurred, like the speciation to create B and C, or the speciation that branched A and then led to B and C. But we can tell that B and C's common ancestor is more recent than the common ancestor that branched off into A, B, and C. So our answer should be the common ancestor of B and C. Which traits do A and B share, and then which traits do B and C share? So if we go back up here, again, just like the activity showed, it was great where it showed little dots traveling up from the roots up to the branch tips. So trait 1 that we see right here, as we move upwards in time, trait 1 belongs to all 3 of the species, A, B, and C. And then the branching here means, okay, trait 2 is only found in species A. Trait 3 is found in species B and C, and then trait 4 is attributed to just species B, and trait 5 is attributed to just species C. So it says use your answers to questions 3 and 4 to help explain why B and C are more closely related to each other than A and C. So if we look back up at our graphic, why are B and C more closely related than A and C? You should be able to use evidence from this graphic instead of just, well, B and C are sitting next to each other. We should be able to actually refer to specific things. And what I put here was that B and C have a more recent common ancestor than A and C do. They also share more traits. So we can see the sharing of more traits is that discussion of them being more related. B and C share both traits 1 and 3, whereas A and C only share trait 1. And so that leads to that conversation of why B and C are more closely related. As we go down to our last picture here, this is just showing equivalent trees, where they're trees that could look a little bit different, but they're showing things in the exact same way. So if we look back up at our original tree for hopefully one last time, the order was A hanging all by itself here as probably the basal taxon, and then B and C over here. The order doesn't have to go A, B, and C, but we should see the smaller branching here showing B and C are more closely related, regardless of how we look at it, regardless of how it's drawn. So if we look at this first one, A is that basal taxon hanging all by itself over here, and then B and C are forked together right here. They're just flipped. So that is an equivalent tree. That's showing us basically the exact same information that the original tree above was. If we look at this next one, this is the one that's actually the one that's not like the others. It's the only one that is not an equivalent tree, because you have B hanging on the basal taxon branch all by itself, which is different information than what we have in the previous trees that we've looked at. If we look at our third tree, it's just flipped on its side, but it's showing us the same information of the original tree from above. This one is just like we walked around to the backside and we're looking back through the tree. It's just flipped, but A, again, is the basal taxon. It's all by itself right here. And then B and C are more closely related together here as sister taxa. And so the first tree, the third tree and the fourth tree are all equivalent to each other, and last time, I promise, to the original tree that we drew up here. Okay, red-green gecko. Under a microscope, the cells of mushrooms, plants, and animals all have visible nuclei. This makes them all eukaryotes. You guys nailed that. What trait do the mushroom and the gecko share that the tree lacks? The tree is a photosynthetic autotroph, whereas the mushroom and the gecko are both heterotrophic organisms. So that's that main trait that they share, and that's actually just based on this sort of superficial. I mean, we're not looking at a lot of traits in this picture that you guys saw when you did the activity, but it is showing the trait that's binding or allowing geckos and the fly agaric mushroom to be more closely related is that they are heterotrophs, whereas the branch over here for the palm tree, that photosynthetic autotroph, is that it's the only one of those three that has that trait of being a photosynthetic autotroph. I drew over here. I'm sure you missed my chicken scratch. There you go, guys. These are all equivalent trees to the original correct one that you did in the activity. So if you included anything along these lines, where again, just like we talked about in the previous page of this activity, palm tree was all by itself, kind of on this side, and then gecko and fly agaric, regardless of how we situate them, flip-flop them, it doesn't really matter. As long as they're shown to be sister taxa right there, you're fine. And so I flipped palm tree over to the left side, and fly agaric and gecko are still connected as sister taxa. All three of these trees are examples of equivalent trees. They're showing the exact same information, just situated a little bit differently. The pop-up question at the end of this level asks whether an animal or plant is more closely related to a fungus. Why is the correct answer most likely surprising? Well, most people would think, oh, mushrooms are stuck in the ground. Plants are stuck in the ground, so they should be more related. But actually, when we look at things and we learn how they derive their energy, where they get their energy from, plants are able to get their energy from the sun and create their own food. They're photosynthetic autotrophs. That makes them not as closely related as to heterotrophs like mushrooms and animals. Okie doke. All right, so you moved on to the next activity, the next game called Familiar Faces. And you first had to learn what an amniote is. An amniote is just an animal whose embryos develop inside a set of protective membranes. An amniotic organism is how they can be referred to also. So in this example, or this game that you played for Familiar Faces, the snake and the dog were the only two of the four animals that we looked at that were amniotic. And so that was a binding thing that allowed them to be a little bit more closely related than the other two species. And if you were to put a cat into the tree, the rest of the tree was the dotted lines here. But if we were to put a cat in there, it's definitely more closely related to dogs than the other species that we learned about in there. I think it was a goldfish and maybe an insect of some sort. We would have to have a binding trait. And so that's where we have that little line down here in small font. But where it says trait there, we want to come up with a trait that binds dogs and cats so that they're more closely related than they are to any of the other species that we saw on that tree. So a possible answer of a trait that separates the dog and the cat from the other organisms on this level could just be hair. All the other species that we looked at did not have hair. Then he moved on to Tree of Life, Vegetarian Edition. And it says, what makes the seaweed different from all the other plants on this tree? Their reproductive mannerisms or their methods of reproduction were different than all the other species on that tree. So it uses spores to reproduce. That's what separated it from the rest. The pop-up question at the end of this level asks whether a banana is more closely related to a lemon or an onion. And based on the work that you did to create that tree, you saw that the banana was more closely related to the onion. Well, probably nothing shocking, but at the same point, it might be sort of surprising because a banana is a fruit and an onion is a vegetable. Yet they are more closely related than a banana, which is a yellow fruit, and a lemon, which is a yellow fruit. So there's more than just those superficial things that we look at, like, oh, look, yellow fruit. Hey, look, yellow fruit. They must be related real closely. There's some more detail that we had to understand there to learn about in terms of the production of their flowers for when they reproduce. Producing different numbers of petals is very much tied to evolutionary relationships. And so that is where we were brought to that understanding of, oh, a banana and an onion are actually more closely related. We'll go down to the last mission, and I could have thrown more missions at you, and it could have taken us days. And I really, like I said, I really do like this activity. It allows you guys to see a little bit more detail and work through in real time an understanding of how we, at a beginner's level, how we develop these evolutionary relationships. So here we're looking at fossils, and we're looking at a cutaway of the Earth, and so we're seeing from the top down something we learned about, again, before we left each other back in March. If these rock layers have been undisturbed, which layer is the oldest and which is the youngest? Youngest rock at the top, oldest rock at the bottom. So we can tell relative ages. Okay, if we really were just to make a quick call, we'd say, oh, well, this that I'm circling right here, this fossil right here is younger or was produced more recently than this fossil down here of this spiral-shelled organism. Okay. And then you guys played one more game of playing Eating Dinosaurs for Dinner. And you learned what another name for the wishbone was, which was the furcula. I would make sure you study this and have an understanding of the concepts that were covered in this. It's nothing too terribly difficult. But that being said, if there's anything that comes up as you're doing your studying and you're not sure, if you need a better explanation from me, message me. Let's set something up and then let's talk. The only thing you have to do between now, this Wednesday morning, and Friday is prep for Friday's quiz. Friday's quiz you can take anytime between Friday, when I post it at 8 o'clock in the morning, and Monday night, next May 4th, 10 p.m. Please, please, please do not wait until the last minute. I probably won't be as forgiving to people that have internet issues or problems that arise at 9:35 on Monday night when a quiz has been up since Friday morning. So please, doesn't mean you got to rush to it and do it Friday morning, but make sure in doing today's bell ringer, you do some thinking and some planning about when you're going to wrap up your studying and when do you want to knock out this quiz. It shouldn't be anything that's over the top difficult. You're going to be studying this activity and you're going to be studying the 2 reading guides that I've gone over and have posted answer keys for just in this most recent Monday folder. So all the information should be there for you. It's just on you guys to finish it up and knock it out. It should be worth about the same amount of points as previous quizzes have been, which is right around 30 points. That's it from room 2205. I probably got to get out of here before somebody comes and yells at me. So have a good rest of your day, guys. Give me a shout if you need anything. Let me see if I can get this thing to stop recording. There we go. Take care, everybody.